All right, so we are here with our March Artist Spotlight, Miss Tanya Roy. She has a whole plethora of specialties, which is really fabulous. I'm going to read through them so that way I don't miss anything. So she is specializing in spoken word art, storytelling, poetry, writing, and children's theater. Tanya also has 6 degrees, which is pretty phenomenal, and I'm quite jealous of. She's also a mom, pretty much a superstar. And as the Butler players like to call her, the boss lady, which I found out, which is pretty sweet. So welcome, Tanya. Harmony is very glad to have you and to feature you for the month of March.
Thank you. And I am honored. It is definitely an honor. Although I do feel like some of that information maybe didn't come from me in that intro.
I may have added in a few little. So I just wanted to start off to really just find out where your passion and love for spoken word art came from. Is this something you grew up with? Was there a particular moment or influence in your life?
So I actually didn't really start thinking about those things until very recently. I think that, you grow up, you graduate from high school, you go to college, life gets busy, and sometimes your art gets away from you. And so it became a hobby, and then it was a lesser hobby, and then I didn't do it for a while. So a couple of years ago, I was asked to be a monologist at Paul Smith's at an event at Paul Smith's. And so I had to really think about these kinds of questions. And what I realized is, my dad would say, I've been telling stories since I learned to talk. But my dad and my grandfather were actually great storytellers. And as far as my grandfather goes, I think there's this great trend in the Adirondacks of sitting around at hunting camp or in the winter at camp and telling stories and then bringing those stories home. And so I think it grew out of that. And my parents are musicians. And although I tried to pursue that, that wasn't a passion of mine. So without that passion, it wasn't something that I was able to really grasp onto and turn into an art form. So I took some classes in college on public speaking and storytelling and writing, which were kind of all mashed together. And then a couple of years ago, I started noticing that there were storytelling events in the local area, maybe in the greater North Country area. So I thought, "Oh, I should probably check some of these out." I am one of those people who just has a running dialogue in my head all the time. I don't hear music in my head. I have words in my head all the time. And I was just looking for a place to put them. And the fact that the type of storytelling that I specialize in is true to life, and the fact that I have this wonderful, fabulous, crazy life helps contribute to the fact that I then use that and turn that into art.
That is fantastic. I love the connection of family. Um, just coming from your father and your grandfather, there is a really special um, thing when things are passed down from generation to generation. Do you see yourself passing it on in your own family line yourself?
My daughter is taking her first public speaking class right now, so that would be a firm no from her. I think my second daughter, there is the possibility that she, even if it just is within the family, that she will take that storytelling vein. You know, my father passed away somewhat recently, and so all we have left are the stories. And I don't want them to, when they get to that point in their life, I don't want them to be missing any stories. I want they become memories. The stories come from memories and then they become memories. So I'm hoping if it's not an art form for them, that they at least carry it through, like you said, through that family line, and then they'll be able to offer that, to their children who will be my grandchildren.
Now, you are also an educator yourself, correct?
Yes.
And where do you work? What do you
So
teach?
I am a literacy coach and academic intervention specialist for the South Louis Central School District. I've actually been there for 23 years. I can't imagine that I ever thought I would be doing the same thing for the same people for 23 years, but here we are. So, yep, I've been there for 23 years, and that really does give me an opportunity to talk to people all the time and to really think about language and your word choice, because that is part of storytelling that I think people miss. You hear a great storyteller and you often talk about the story, but you don't always realize that part of the reason you enjoy a good story is because it has been told well. So reading was always extremely important to me, and that's the intervention area that I work in is reading. So I get to, work with kids and teach them the joy that reading can bring, but I also have the opportunity to talk to kids and to talk to adults all day long and really think about syntax and sentence structure and timing. I can't be quite as funny as I prefer to be when I'm at work and I'm in that formal setting, but I think that comes out in all of the other artistic stuff that I do with spoken word. Is a lot of it leans toward, if not comedy, then comedic relief, or we'll get to a really sentimental story and I'll throw some comedy in there to kind of relieve the tension that can come between audience and storyteller when something is very sentimental or tragic or whatever.
I also really love how you take what your passion is, your performing art, and you also get to do it within your daily life. Now, is poetry, spoken word art, are there like specific genres like you would see in theater? Like there's comedy versus tragedy. What are different like sects of
Yep.
the storytelling world?
Absolutely. So it all kind of falls under spoken word.
Mm-hmm.
And then poetry is definitely one. And I do a form of narrative poetry, narrative storytelling. Everything is true to life. There is a genre that falls into the historical. So I know that the first storytellers I was exposed to were storytellers that came to our school actually to talk about Native American tales, and that was so that kind of historical is its own genre. Comedy can also be broken into a couple of different genres. Storytelling can have a comedic spin, but then there's also improv, which I really enjoy, and then stand-up comedy that is a vein and all its own and requires a very special type of person with some really specific type of practice and a really thick skin. So yeah, the spoken word art, I guess, art form has genres and subgenres, I think, just like music or theater. And the intention of all of them is to make the audience feel something or to connect in some way. And poetry does it sometimes with the fewest amount of words possible. And stand up comedy, you get to use lots of words. I fall smack dab in the middle. The kind of storytelling that I do is generally 5 to 10 minutes, which requires some really specific word choice and those kinds of things. So it depends on how you want to reach your audience and also how verbose you want to be while doing it.
Do you have a favorite like performance of storytelling that you've done? Like, is there a specific story you remember reading to a specific audience? Is there one that you can pinpoint in your mind that was your favorite?
So there is, I say it's the story that launched 1,000 ships. The very first story that I told that won me a spot in the Grand Slam for the North Country Public Radio, paired with the Adirondack Center for the Writing, and they did what's called a Howl Story Slam. And so that one has never been recorded. Once you've used it, you can't use it again for that same competition. So it's never been recorded. It's never been written down. I know it by heart. I can recite it with because the storytelling that I do requires no notes. And that helps because I use my hands and facial expressions. And it's kind of like, and that's why I think the other term for what I do is monologist, because it's one person theater, it's a single person show. So that story, someday that story will get recorded and it will be available on Facebook or iTunes, but I'm holding on to that one because I got really lucky. And this past month, I was able to perform at the first ever virtual um, moth event on the Eastern Coast. So they did it via Zoom, kind of like we're doing this. And I was really honored to be chosen. And I didn't tell this one specific story because I'm holding on to it, hoping that it will be an award winner someday. It's got the perfect mix. It's like when you read a book or watch a movie, it's kind of the perfect mix of all of the things that you want to know with its, and then it has the wonderful surprise ending. So that one is my favorite. But I will say that when I started storytelling the second time around here later in life, almost all the stories I told at first leaned toward the comedic. And then when you enter a story slam, they give you a topic, and the topics don't all lend themselves to being funny. So I started to really work with telling stories that were sentimental, telling stories that had a romantic flair, those kinds of things. And although the comedy works its way in, it's been nice to spread into those other genres. I did do an event with the Phoenix Rising, and Rebirth was the theme at in Watertown at the Arts Council, and that was a totally different kind of open-ended, as much time as I needed storytelling. So nice to dabble in all of those. But any storytelling event where there are other people and you get to listen to them tell their stories and feel the audience respond and be part of that audience, and then you get to present and be part of the energy that way, those are always my favorite. The one that I would recommend everyone get a chance to experience at some point is when they pair a storyteller or a monologist with a true to life story with an improv troupe. And that is something that there's a group out of Syracuse and a group out of Canada that I work with that do that. And so I will tell a story, or someone will tell a story, and then the improv troupe will make up a skit based on the information that's given in the story immediately afterward. And that is just a really good time. So if you ever have the chance to see one of those, I highly recommend.
Yeah, that would be a treat. I definitely would love to do that. Invite me.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned a story slam. Can you explain what a story slam is? Is there like a generic setup to, if you were to go to one, how they would be set up? Or is there a certain task list you go through? That sort of thing.
So they're called a story slam because they're supposed to happen very quickly. That's where the 5 minute time limit comes from. And you're absolutely right. They look pretty much the same all across the board. So whether it is a regional story slam sponsored by the radio station, or it is a national story slam sponsored by the Moth, for example, they are all set up almost exactly the same. Usually names go in a hat. You don't know what order you're going to perform in until you get to the end. When you win, you get to move on to the next round. So when you get to the end, then it's a little bit different. But yep, you have 5 minutes to tell a true story with no notes. It has to be memorized. And each one has its own rules about what happens if you go over the 5 minutes, but it's highly discouraged. And they give you a theme, and you can bend the theme however you would like. As long as your story is identifiable as being related to the theme, then you can create a story that is true to life, and it has to be something that has happened to you in the first person. So I think that's one of the things that makes storytelling a little bit different than some of the other forms of spoken word art or art in general, is that it has to be something that has happened to you in the first person. We don't get to tell other people's stories. Instead, you're encouraged to get other people to tell their own stories. So that's kind of the basic setup. Is you either purchase your ticket or you show up at the event completely cold, and you walk in and you write your name down, and everybody gets 5 minutes with a little introduction in between, and they just slam their way through. And at the end, sometimes it's audience vote, sometimes it's judges vote. If there's an additional competition like another level, then they bring judges and the judges will vote. And then you go to the next level of competition and it looks very much the same. The only difference is you can't tell the same story and you get a different topic. Every once in a while, they'll give you a few extra minutes as that time goes on. In the virtual setting, a lot of the story slams that I've done virtually have done less than 5 minutes, especially if it's a recording where you're not performing live, because it is a little harder to keep the audience's attention. And it's harder as a performance artist. And I think this probably applies to music too. When you're not getting audience feedback, it's not as much fun for the whole 5 minutes or 7 minutes.
Now, are there any story slams around our community? Is there anything in Northern New York that people that are listening in would be interested in maybe going?
So, specific to what I do, there are the regional story slams that are hosted by North Country Public Radio and the Adirondack Center for the Writing. So you can Google or go on Facebook and look up either one of those and look up Howell Story Slam, and you will see those. They, over COVID, they were doing some recorded ones, and now they've gone to doing this kind of virtual but live event, and those are all building upon one another. So I won the last one that they had. The theme was holidays and traditions. So I won that one, and then there will be a few more, and eventually when we can be back together in person, all of the winners will come together for what we call the Grand Slam. That's those are the only regional ones right now. We do want to start hosting, open mic nights where people can come work on their craft, regardless of if you're a poet or a spoken word artist. But as far as competitions go, that you can watch online. And then the Moth has started doing all of their events online as well. So if you, again, Google or go on their Facebook page, it's called the Moth Story Hour, and they use a very similar setup. And no matter where you are, you can watch those, which has been nice with the virtual events, is you can tune in from wherever you are. So those are the two that are easy to find right now and that are ongoing. When everything reopens, then there are some in the Syracuse area, and there are also non-competitive ones where maybe the second Tuesday of every month, or the first and third Fridays of every month, you can go to a restaurant in Syracuse and they will host just a storytelling event, and you can get up and tell a story, and there's no competition attached to it. But those aren't happening right now.
Gotcha. That is great. So that way people have the opportunity, they can do it more recreationally, or if they wish to get into the competitive field, they may. So they have
Absolutely. And I think that the one thing that I have learned through doing all of this virtually is I have a very unique style, I think, as far as storytelling goes, because what I do is aloud. I don't write anything down. So none of my stories are anywhere except being recorded. But because I had to go through watching myself, you can't normally see yourself on stage. So I think that has helped hone the craft a little bit too. And if you have any inclination whatsoever that you want to be a storyteller, it's like everything else. You have to practice, 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 practice on your family, practice on your friends when you do a Zoom happy hour, but definitely look for the recreational types of practice, because they're not so stringent on the rules. And if you don't have a topic that, or a story that fits the topic, just go and listen, just log on and listen, and you'll learn a lot about storytelling that way as well. But I think sometimes storytelling is one of those things where people think, I can tell a story, and then you get up there and you realize you can't remember what you wanted to say, or 5 minutes goes by really quickly. So it is like anything else, it requires practice, and you do have to be able to critique yourself a little bit.
I also generally do not miss many opportunities. It's how you collect great stories. But this particular day, some friends of mine and I had concert tickets to go see the Dave Matthews Band in Syracuse. And they decided that they were going to go get dinner at Dinosaur Barbecue before we went to see the concert, because I am a Dinosaur Barbecue virgin, and in my circle of friends, that is blasphemous. So they decided they were going to break that cycle, but we decided to order takeout so that we could tailgate with our Dinosaur Barbecue in the parking lot. We get there and the food's not quite ready, so we have a couple of drinks, and they're hitting me a little bit hard because I haven't had lunch in anticipation of what is supposed to be the best barbecue you can get in Syracuse. And finally the woman comes out with this big stack of styrofoam containers, and I take the one off the top and I open it, and sure enough, it is what I ordered for dinner. So I am enamored by the smell coming from the baked beans in the front corner of this white styrofoam container, and I decide I'm going to throw all caution to the wind and just lick the top of them while we're standing in the bar. And I get right about here, and I feel a tap on my shoulder. And it's my boyfriend who says to me, "It's going to be easier for parking if we put everything in one car, so we're going to get all of our stuff out of our car and put it in Kelly's car, and then we can leave." And I, And he taps me on the shoulder again, and he says, by we, I mean you and I. So I reluctantly put the styrofoam container back on the top of the pile. We get everything out of our car, we put it into Kelly's car, and we're on our way to get a parking spot. As we're driving, I open the styrofoam container and I decide I will be a little less barbaric this time, and I rip into the fork with my teeth, and he taps me on the shoulder. And I look at him. And he gives me a look that it takes a minute to register what he's telling me, and then it clicks. We are riding in Kelly's brand new car with the black leather interior, and I probably shouldn't be shoveling baked beans into my face in the car. So I shut the container and reluctantly put it back on top of the pile. We realized the line to get parking is about an hour and 20 minutes long, and we're about T-minus 2 hours to the concert. But Kelly is in the Air Force, and he has some mad driving skills, and 20 minutes later, we have a parking spot, and we are tailgating. I open the container. I've got the fork, and it is full of pulled pork that smells like molasses and whiskey, and I am starving, and I'm a little bit tipsy, and I get the fork right here, and he taps me on the shoulder. What? And he says, "Do you know where the concert tickets are?" And I freeze, debating whether or not to answer the question with the fork in midair, because I know that the tickets are in the glove compartment of the car that we left in the parking lot of Dinosaur Barbecue. And so I answer him, and I reluctantly put the fork down and close the container and put it back on the pile, as we now have to take off with the car and go back to the parking lot. We get in the parking lot, he screeches to a halt. He's about halfway across when he stops, and he does the pocket pat, which is the international symbol for, shit, where are my keys? They're back with our friends who are tailgating and eating Dinosaur Barbecue. Yeah. So as he's making some frantic phone calls and hoping that the beeping on the other end of the phone will open the car on the key fob, I realize that there's a motorcycle repair shop attached to Dinosaur Barbecue. And if I know anything about my friends who drive Harleys, it's that they can break into my car. So I jog across the street, and I'm a little bit tipsy, and I'm really hungry, and I'm a little bit panicky and a little bit out of breath, and I say, "Hey, guys, do you have a, which, by the way, is not the international symbol for Jimmy Stick." Yeah. After they finish laughing at me, they unlock the car, and 10 minutes later, we're on our way with our tickets. We decide we're going to come in from the north because it'll be quicker to get back to the parking spot where our friends are tailgating without us. Except where we need to take the left, there's a big sign and a police officer that says buses only. I know better than to argue with a police officer, so we drive around, we come in from the south, and the line is still an hour long. Then I think, you know what? I have some mad carpool, minivan driving mommy skills of my own. I can make it to the front of that line too. 10 minutes later, we're at the part where we're supposed to be veering off from traffic to pull into our parking spot, and there's another police officer with a sign that says, "Lot full." This time, I'm a little less eager to please, so I put the window down and I say, "Hey, I have a spot. I've already..." "Keep on moving." No, really, look, I have the ticket. If you just keep on moving." The next time I go to open my mouth to talk to the cop, he has decided he has had enough of me. He takes one step toward the car, puts his right hand on his right hip, and I take off, because that is the international symbol for I'm about to tase your ass. At this point, we are 30 minutes across the other side of the parking lot, and we're driving about half a mile an hour. I say to my boyfriend, "I'm going to jump out, see if I can get one of these other police officers to help us, and I'll catch up. I can walk half a mile an hour." The minute I close the car door, the line speeds up and he's gone. I reach for my phone to call him and realize it's also with the keys in the parking space that we left with our friends who are tailgating. So, a little bit defeated, I take a shortcut thinking I will go find him where he is parking. I come across two security guards and they have a golf cart. I'm like, yes. I throw myself on their mercy. "Will you please put me in your golf cart and take me to find someone who I know?" And they're like, "Oh, sorry, man. We're going to get fired if we put you in the golf cart. We don't want to get fired. But if it will make you feel better, you can stay and get high." I'm thinking all I'm going to want then is the damn Dinosaur Barbecue. 10 minutes later, I have found my boyfriend who has parked the car. We are looking for our friends because we've played a rousing game of Tell me what you can see, drunk people on the other end of the phone. We'll come find you. And they are walking toward us with 4 chairs, a cooler half full of beer, 2 backpacks, and absolutely no styrofoam containers. They look at me apologetically and shrug. Sorry, it's the one thing we couldn't carry. To add insult to injury, as if missing my opportunity to eat dinosaur barbecue for the first time 4 times in one night wasn't enough, as we're on the shuttle bus driving by the original parking spot, there are 2 white styrofoam containers, half empty of dinosaur barbecue, being eaten by a stray dog.